Hello, my friends, and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and in today's video, sponsored by the makers of Rise of Kingdoms, I want to update my legendary investment tier list, the most viewed series in Rise of Kingdoms history about which commanders are the best to invest in. Now, what I mean by that is if you put sculptures into the commander today, hopefully you'll enjoy them for like literally years, okay? And we've gotten commanders that are like that, like Guan Yu has been insane, William, Yi-Song, Alexander the Great. There's a lot of commanders where you can pick which ones will have very, very long-lasting value. Now, obviously, a lot has changed in the way that the game works. Even now, we have a new formation on its way, the Smite formation, which should make certain commanders even stronger. But if you're looking at this list for the first time, where I evaluate based on top priority, low priority, before Season of Conquest, niche role, I've got just no commanders that you should really not invest in my estimation, free commanders. Let me explain again that this list is about putting sculptures in now and getting value for a long time. That top priority category is where you start. If you don't have all those commanders maxed, you need to have a really good reason before you graduate to the low priority category. That's where you would look next. Then you could go to niche role where you say, okay, I've already got top priority and low priority maxed out. Let's go look at specific commanders that we bring in for specific purposes. So let's talk about why it is that I'm updating this list, because I just finished fighting in the 960 2377 KVK. I pulled down 5.8 billion kill points, which is the most I've ever had in any KVK. And also, I just fought on my restart account in 2293. So I've seen sort of both ends of the spectrum, the literal absolute top end gameplay, and also what like low Imperium A seed kingdoms are doing, okay? And there's a couple changes that I think are really important. Let's start with the elephant in the room, or in this case, as it turns out, the siege engine in the room, because I think we need to put siege into low priority, okay? What do I mean by that? Well, I don't think siege is something you should do first, but I do think that at some point having siege is powerful, and Cordoba with Gajamada is the play. These two together, the exact order we could debate, but I think it's Cordoba that's supposed to be the primary. I could be misremembering. I'll update the pinned comment either way. These two are incredibly powerful because they do normal damage, and they, I'm told by the people who main siege, are very, very strong together. Even though we just got two new siege, okay? Neither of them, I'm told, are a part of the best combo. This is the best combo. Now, the reason I bumped them up to low priority is that there are times where setting up a siege tower just doesn't work. When a zone opens, that's really not the best thing I think that you could do. When the fight is very mobile, it's really not the best thing you can do. But the moment that the fight achieves a stationary front, or certainly there's a geographic blocker like a river, then they become very powerful and fight deciding. So I would argue that siege are something you should have in your back pocket. Or if you're a lower spender, potentially even you can bump the priority up. And like, look, if you can only contribute so much before you're tapped, you know, if you play siege well, you can take very little damage and dish out just a ridiculous amount of damage with minimal counter-player answers. So that is why siege get bumped up. These two are the siege that I'm bumping up. And moving forward, unless something major changes, siege will now forever be a part of my list. Now, if you're subscribed to my channel, you know that I like to have no more than 3 commanders of each troop type in the top priority plus low priority categorization. That is because I think, generally speaking, you should never have more than 2 pairs of any one troop type. And if you're doing that, okay, 2 pairs of one troop type, that means there's like a 4th commander that when new commanders show up, they're probably going to get replaced. So we're about to get new infantry. And I have 1, 2, 3 infantry commanders in here, okay? And that's very intentional. I actually have only 2 cavalry commanders, and I have only 2 archer commanders, because I just think that archers and cavs at this moment in time, like, they're good, but I'm expecting more soon, and I wouldn't invest in anything yet. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But I want to talk about this Wallace. Wallace is a commander that a lot of people feel like is not even as good as Alex, okay? Alexander the Great does a huge debuff. He does instant proc damage. When paired with Liu Che, it's absolutely disgusting because Liu Che does a combo attack. Combo attacks are extra basic attacks, which means you can trigger instant proc damage from Alexander the Great. 1,700 damage factor to be exact. And it happens a lot more frequently. And so a lot of people would bump down the Wallace. I happen to really like my Wallace with Liu Che, but here's the real, okay? At least what I think the situation's going to be is that in the next couple months, I think we're going to get new Smite infantry. We literally are getting a new Smite formation as of the time of this recording, the pincer formation, I think, right? So if we're about to get this new formation and you can only have 2 Smite commanders, in other words, you've only got like 1 Smite set of armaments or even 1 Arch set of armaments, then I don't think that Wallace is going to be a part of that. So even though normally I would say, oh, keep 3 infantry up here, right? Actually, I think in this case, if you have only 1 Arch set of armaments and 1 Wedge set of armaments, 4 infantry, that Wallace is not going to be a part of that calculus, okay? And it's going to be the new guy plus Liu Che, probably, that get paired together. That is my suspicion. Now, some people run Liu Che with Philip, and that performs incredibly well. We'll talk more about Philip in just a minute, but I think he really excels when you have 5 or more armies in the open field, which is the only thing stopping me from putting him in the top priority category, all right? In fact, we're already talking about Philip. Let me just double click on that real quick. So the reason that Philip is not in top priority is that he's giving a buff that benefits his army plus 4 others. That only really pops off when you have more armies to be buffing. So for a lot of people that don't get to 5 armies or 6 or 7 armies, he's not as high priority. For those that do, I would put him up here. Easy, right? Easy choice, okay? But if you don't, great, keep him down here. Okay. And most people don't. That is like the reality of the state of the game and where people are at. Okay. So we bump out the Wallace specifically because I'm expecting a new Smite open fielder, especially because we're getting a Smite formation that's going to be paired with Liu Che. And I think that is going to absolutely slap. And I think most people only have 1 Arch or what will be Smite set, not 2. And I think with Ragnar Prime, there's plenty of reason to have a skill damage infantry set. So, weirdly enough, Wallace gets bumped out specifically because of that new Smite commander that's theoretically on the way. Now, it could be that they do big skill damage. It's possible, okay? And it could be that you still keep like Wallace with Liu Che and that the new commander does Smite or skill damage, and it's Ragnar plus the new guy. These are infantry predictions. Who knows what's going to happen? I would say, though, that if I try to err on the safe rather than sorry side of things, and the safe rather than sorry side is going to just be to bump Wallace down to niche roll. All right? I'm still going to use him, but we'll find out what the new commander does. Okay? We'll find out. Like Ragnar with Skippy Prime is amazing. It's a great combo. So, it's possible the new commander has a skill damage mode, like how Arthur has skill damage and combo damage. And when paired with Ragnar is just disgusting, okay? And in that case, the Wallace was still good, but we can leave him in niche role, especially because Alexander the Great, some people would argue, is even better for that instant proc damage. And also on the 4th skill, not the 4th skill, the expertise skill, you have a way of making armies around you take extra damage. All right, so we've adjusted for infantry, but now we need to talk about archers. Bro, archers, what a situation. So I don't think I'm going to move around the archers right now. I am tempted to put Shajar in niche role, but I don't think so. Here's my belief. And if I'm wrong, then GG, okay? But my belief is that Shajar was somewhat underwhelming at her release. A Canyon god, make no mistake about it, but somewhat underwhelming with regard to her impact. And that's because she's got a true damage mode that nobody to pair her with to really maximize the heck out of that. I think Philip with Shajar, in that order, is going very well for people that are doing that with Echelon, but most people aren't, and they don't have the leadership gear, nor do they have the Echelon archer stuff. And so for most people, they're using her with some sort of skill damage in the open field, or they're even benching her because they'd rather have double AoE damage. So it is my belief that we will get a true damage AoE archer for the open field that makes Shajar pop off. That is the one and only reason I'm keeping her in low priority. If you do not think that will be the case, then you should not start on Shajar. You should consider her niche priority, a niche role. And I'm honestly tempted to even move her there now and say the only archer that I'm really comfortable with right now is Zhuge Liang. And you may recall the last time I did this list, I put Herman Prime down here because skill damage seems to be less and less of a percentage of total damage dealt. Not that the poison debuff is bad, but that we seem to have a lot of other forms of damage that are not enhanced by virtue of making the target take more skill damage. And as far as cavalry go, I think this stays the same, right? Arthur is the GOAT. Thuo is still very performant, especially with Arthur. These are the safest cavalry investments at this moment in time, all right? And I've not seen any compelling evidence to bump Subutai out of where I have him as a sort of niche role rally situation to something more significant. Now, there are a few commanders in niche role that I feel like we could probably move out at this point. I don't think there's any reason to start a Xeno investment in 2025. Okay. I don't think there's any reason to start a Dido investment in 2025. I don't think there's any reason to start a Yan Zizka investment in 2025. You could make an argument that like the Eleanor pairing is a thing and you might drop that into a pass. There actually is an argument for this, but I think I've seen Eleanor with Hera, but I'm not seeing Eleanor Yan Zizka. So I'm going to bump that into the just no category as well. I don't think these are projects that there's a lot of reason to start. Okay. And I think now that we've seen the way Subutai has worked out for rallying, and oh my God, Attila Subutai, bro, Attila just always finds ways to live. Attila is the ultimate cockroach in Rise of Kingdoms, actually. The bro never dies. No matter how much the meta changes, there's always some reason to use Attila, which is just jaw-dropping. But whatever. Normal attack damage, it's a powerful mechanic. And immune to the disarm effect or silence effect. It's silence, right? Yeah. It's just really powerful. But we do need to get rid of, I think, Justinian as a project that you would start in 2025. I've not seen compelling evidence that he's the Cav rally at this point. I'm not saying you can't run a good one with him, but I would assume Subutai would just be better. And the strongest thing I think about the Attila Subutai rally is the burst damage dealt by Subutai. He does 1,000 damage factor 3 times, all in an instant with his active skill, plus whatever other synergies you may run with combo, which is only going to get better with time as more commanders are released. So Attila boosting the damage of combo by boosting his normal damage and then hitting with that big damage, it's just so busted, bro. It's so busted. So I think that still absolutely slays. And it bursts out garrisons in a way that is hard to fill through. So yeah, no, I think that's where that's at. So all in all, only a few changes going into what might be a new infantry smite meta. If you enjoyed the vid, throw a like on here, subscribe. I produce this list every time there is a meaningful change, or I try to do it monthly if things are changing pretty quickly or we get anything new. And I suspect I'll be updating this list again with predictions for new infantry. But I wanted to go in and make these changes based off of my battling against, 960, and I'm in 2377, because it was very insightful, very informative. And the only thing that I'm kind of questioning in this list is, if Shajar stays here. And the only reason that she stays here is because I deeply believe we will get an AoE true damage dealer. If we don't, if you don't think it's going to happen, don't do Shajar. And if you're a player with a lot of marches, you could bump up the priority of Philip, in my opinion. The other argument I've heard for Philip that I think is reasonable is you could say, well, because you could switch him from one troop type to another, use him as the secondary, you could argue putting him up here because he's versatile. And I get that. And I think there's value to that as well. I definitely do. Personally, I kind of err on the side of, I don't know, like you got to get kill points or you're going to get kicked out of your kingdom. And I think if you have a small number of marches, he'll sort of underperform, will be my suspicion. But we can update the pin comment, okay? Let me know your thoughts down below. If you want to see the fighting that I did versus 960, check the cards in the end screen. Money where my mouth is. You can see what I used. You can see how I did. You can see the role of Siege. In fact, I'll have a dedicated video about Siege over there. Go watch it. Until next time, you have fun smashing your enemies. Take care, everybody.